about to be sold for not $19.10, 19 even less than the cost of a single pound of coffee. The auctioneer, a man named Cyrus Feldman, grips the deed of sale in his hand, and his voice carries across the crowd with practiced authority, though almost careless. But something feels wrong with this auction, something that makes even the hardened slave traders in the crowd shift uneasily, something that would set in motion a chain of events so disturbing that the city of Savannah would spend the next 80 years attempting to erase every document of what happened that day. Tonight we uncover the truth they buried, and we will follow this woman's story to its shocking ending. An ending that involves murder, betrayal, and an act of resistance so brutal that when it was finally discovered in 1931, the authorities instantly sealed the evidence and ordered that nobody speak about it openly again. This is the story they never wanted anyone to hear. Before we move any further into what happened in Savannah on that cold November morning, I need you to do something important. Subscribe to this channel right now. Hit that notification bell, because stories like this, stories that reveal the darkest chapters of American history, these are the stories that get hidden, pushed aside, forgotten. And I want to know something. Where exactly are you watching from? Put your city or your country in the comments. Let's see how far this story reaches. Let's build a community that will not allow these truths to disappear. Now, let's continue. The woman standing on that wooden platform has a name, although it appears in official documents only 2 times, and both times it is spelled differently. In the bill of sale from her earlier owner, she is listed as Dinah. In the coroner's record filed 6 years later, she is noted as Diana. For our purposes, we will call her Dinah, because that is the name she used when she finally spoke, when she at last told her story to the one person who actually listened. Dinah was born in 1827 on a rice plantation outside Charleston, South Carolina. She never knew her father. Her mother, a woman named Patience, worked in the fields from sunrise until long after nightfall, her hands permanently stained green from rice stalks, her back bent from years of labor that would eventually kill her when Dinah was just 11 years old. After Patience passed away, Dinah was sold to a tobacco merchant in Charleston, a man named Elias Cartwright, who needed domestic help for his expanding household. Elias was 43 years old, married to a woman named Constance, and father to 4 children ranging in age from 6 to 15. He was also a deacon at the First Presbyterian Church, a member of the Charleston Chamber of Commerce, and by all public accounts, a respectable businessman who treated his property, human and otherwise, with so-called proper Christian values. That was the public story. The private truth was something else entirely. Dinah worked in the Cartwright household for 3 years from age 11 to 14. She cleaned, she cooked, she looked after the younger children, she did everything she was commanded to do, and Elias Cartwright watched her. He watched her in that particular way that enslaved girls and women learn to recognize, that predatory attention that signaled danger, that made survival require endless alertness. When Dinah turned 14, Elias's attention became something more than watching. It turned into action. What happened between them, if we can even use that word between, as if there was any equal choice involved, what happened was rape, methodical, repeated, and forced over years. Dinah had no power to refuse. Enslaved women had no legal right to deny their owners anything. The law did not recognize their bodily rights. The law considered them property, and property could not be violated because property has no self to violate. Constance Cartwright knew. She knew because enslaved women working in close spaces could not hide pregnancy. She knew because Dinah's body changed in ways that made the truth unavoidable. But Constance did not accuse her husband. She accused Dinah. She claimed Dinah tempted a decent Christian man, that she had ruined the holiness of a godly home. The blame in Constance's belief stayed completely with the 16-year-old girl who had no power to say no, instead of the 46-year-old man who had full power to take whatever he wished. In March of 1843, Dinah gave birth to a daughter. The baby was noticeably light-skinned, her features clearly showing mixed parentage. Elias Cartwright refused to claim the baby as his. He named her Ruth, had her recorded in his property ledger as the child of his servant Dinah, father unknown, and continued his life exactly as he had before. Constance demanded that Dinah and the child be moved out of the main house. They were relocated to the servants' quarters, a cramped building behind the main residence where 6 other enslaved people lived in conditions that barely counted as shelter. Dinah raised Ruth while continuing to work in the Cartwright household. She fed her daughter at night. After 16-hour days of labor, she sang to her in quiet whispers, songs her own mother had sung, melodies that held memories of Africa, of freedom, of a world before chains. And she watched Ruth grow, watched as the child's features became undeniable evidence of who her father was, as the likeness to Elias Cartwright became so obvious that neighbors began to whisper, to guess, to understand what everyone had always known but politely ignored. In 1847, when Ruth was 4 years old, Elias K. Wright sold her. He sold her to a slave trader named Marcus Pennington for $400, a normal price for a healthy child of that age. He sold her on a Tuesday morning without warning Dinah, without giving time for farewells, without allowing the mother even one last moment with her daughter. Dinah was working in the kitchen when she heard Ruth screaming from the front of the house. By the time she reached outside, the child was already gone, placed into a wagon that was rolling down the road, her small hands stretching back toward the only home she had ever known. Dinah fell in the street. The other enslaved people in the house had to lift her inside. For 3 days she did not speak, did not eat, barely moved. She had entered a depth of grief so severe that it looked like death itself, and perhaps she wished it were, but she did not die. Her body refused her that escape. Instead, she stayed alive, and surviving meant returning to work, meant continuing to serve the man who had raped her and then sold the child born from that rape, meant functioning in a world designed to break her humanity piece by piece. 2 years later, in the summer of 1849, Dinah became pregnant again. The father was Elias Cartwright. There was no doubt about this, no uncertainty. Constance Cartwright's anger was immediate and absolute. She could accept one incident, one child, one public shame. But a second pregnancy made the situation undeniable, made it impossible to keep pretending that Dinah was the one seducing and Elias simply a victim of temptation. A second pregnancy showed plainly that Elias Cartwright was a man who repeatedly violated an enslaved woman he owned, who had been doing so for years, and who had no intention of stopping. Constance gave Elias a final decision: remove her. I will not have that woman in my home carrying your children while I live under the same roof. Sell her, trade her, give her away. I do not care, but she leaves this house within 1 month, or I will make this matter public in a way that will destroy your name permanently. Elias understood the threat. His standing in Charleston society depended on keeping a respectable image. Wealthy men were expected to be quiet about their violations of enslaved women, whispered about perhaps, but never publicly admitted. A wife publicly accusing her husband of repeated rape of his own property would cross a line that even Charleston's tolerant culture toward slavery could not ignore. So Elias made plans. He contacted a business associate in Savannah, a merchant named William Hadley, who owed him money from a failed cotton investment. Elias offered a deal. He would forgive Hadley's debt, around $800, in exchange for Hadley buying Dinah and taking her to Savannah, far enough from Charleston that she would never return, far enough that Constance would never have to look at her again, far enough that Elias could pretend she never existed. Hadley agreed. The arrangement was set for early November during Savannah's public auction, where such sales took place with official efficiency. But Elias added one specific term to the sale, a condition so cruel that it shows the depth of his anger. He set Dinah's minimum price at 19. The amount was intentional, designed to humiliate. In 1849, the usual price for an enslaved woman of childbearing age ranged from $700 to $900. A pregnant woman carrying a child who would eventually become more property should have been valued even higher. By setting the price at 19 cents, Elias achieved several goals at once. He showed that Dinah had no value to him at all. He made sure she would be bought by someone who saw she was being offered as damaged goods, someone who would treat her in that same cruel way. And most of all, he guaranteed that Dinah would understand exactly how worthless he considered her, how completely disposable she was in his mind. William Hadley traveled to Charleston in early November to finish the arrangement. He met with Elias in the man's study, reviewed the documents, signed the required papers. The bill of sale was carefully prepared, listing Dinah's rough age, her condition, pregnant about 5 months, and the agreed price, 19. Elias Cartwright signed his name with the very same pen he used to sign church documents and business papers. His signature was neat, clear, and frighteningly confident. Unremarkable, just another transaction in a life made of transactions. Dinah was told about the sale the night before she was to leave Charleston. She was given no choice, no chance to gather belongings because she owned nothing of her own, no chance to say goodbye to the people she had lived beside for years. She was simply property being moved from one owner to another, and property did not need emotional consideration. The journey from Charleston to Savannah took 2 days by wagon. Hadley hired a driver, a white man named Silas Burke, who often transported human cargo. Dinah rode in the back of the wagon, her hands tied, a precaution against escape, though where could she possibly run? 5 months pregnant in a region where every white person felt entitled to stop and question any black person traveling without papers. They reached Savannah on November 6th. The city was larger than Charleston, busier, filled with the sounds of work and building. The port buzzed with activity. Ships loading and unloading goods from across the world, cotton and rice and tobacco flowing out, manufactured items and expensive goods flowing in, and human beings, thousands of human beings being bought and sold and traded like animals. William Hadley took Dinah straight to the auction house, a large wooden building near T. riverfront where these sales happened 3 times each week. The auctioneer, Cyrus Feldman, examined Dinah with the experienced eye of someone who had judged thousands of people for sale. He noted her age, her condition, her general health. Then he saw the bill of sale, saw the minimum price of 19 cents, and his expression changed. "Something is wrong with this one," Feldman said to Hadley. "What is it, disease, injury, mental problem?" "Nothing like that," Hadley replied. "She is healthy, able to work." "The child seems fine then. Why 19 cents? The seller wanted her gone quickly." "It is a personal matter, family trouble," Feldman understood instantly. This woman had done something or had something done to her that made her last owner want her removed from his home. The low price was a message, a warning to possible buyers. This property comes with trouble. You will include that in the auction description, Feldman said. I will not lie about her condition and risk my name. Hadley agreed. He did not care how Feldman presented Dinah to the crowd. He simply wanted to finish the sale, collect his payment for the debt Elias had forgiven, and move on with his business. The auction was planned for the next morning, November 7th, at 10 o'clock. Dinah spent the night in a holding cell below the auction house, a cold stone room where people waiting to be sold were kept like animals in cages. She did not sleep. She sat with her back against the wall, her hands resting on her stomach, feeling the child move inside her. This child who would be born into slavery, who would never know freedom, who would belong to William Hadley or whoever bought them at auction, who would live and die as property unless something changed, unless the whole system collapsed. And in November of 1849, that felt as likely as the sky opening and God himself coming down to pass judgment on the men who built their lives on suffering. When morning arrived, Dinah was brought up from the cell and placed near the auction platform. She could see the crowd forming, maybe 60 or 70 people, some serious buyers, plantation owners and merchants, others just spectators who came to auctions as entertainment, who watched human beings sold and found it no more troubling than watching cows sold at a market. Cyrus Feldman took his place on the platform at exactly 10 a.m. The November sun was already warm, and the air smelled of salt water and tobacco smoke. Feldman started with furniture, several chairs, and a dining table from an estate. Then animals, a pair of horses, some chickens, then human beings. He sold a young man around 20 for $950. He sold an older woman, described as an excellent cook, for $300. Then he called for Dinah. She was brought onto the platform by Silas Burke, who placed her in the center where everyone could look. Feldman read from the bill of sale, in a voice that carried across the crowd. Female named Dinah, about 22 years of age, currently with child, estimated 5 months, experienced in domestic work, able to cook, clean, and perform house tasks. Minimum bid 19 cents. The crowd reacted immediately. 19 cents, someone called out. What is wrong with her? Is she sick? I am told she is healthy, Feldman answered. The price reflects a personal matter between the seller and the property, not a problem in the property itself. That answer satisfied no one. In the economy of slavery, price meant quality. A woman offered for 19 cents must be very flawed, diseased, dangerous, or mentally unstable. No logical buyer would risk money on someone sold at such a shockingly low price unless they knew something others did not. Several men who had been ready to bid suddenly lost interest. They turned away, looking at the next items to be sold, but 3 men stayed interested. The first was William Hadley himself. He had set up this auction to take Dinah to complete his agreement with Elias Cartwright. He stood near the front of the crowd, ready to bid. The second man was someone Hadley had never seen before, a tall, thin figure wearing traveling clothes, standing near the back, his face hidden under a wide hat. The third man was local, a Savannah plantation owner named Thornton Graves. Graves owned a medium-sized cotton plantation about 15 miles outside the city, and he was known by enslaved people as one of the cruelest masters in Chatham County. His plantation had the highest death rate of any similar business, not because of accidents or disease, but because Graves worked people to death on purpose, deciding it was more profitable to use up workers quickly than to care for them for many years. Graves had been watching Dinah since she stepped on the platform, and something about this situation rested him. A healthy, pregnant woman being sold for 19 cents. That kind of chance did not come often. Are you ready to hear what I write next? This is where the story grows even darker, where we discover what Thornton Graves planned to do with Dinah, and where we meet the mysterious stranger who will change everything. Cyrus Feldman lifted his hand to quiet the noisy crowd. 19 cents, he called out. Do I have a bid of 19 cents for this property? William Hadley raised his hand at once. 19 cents. The crowd looked at him. Hadley was known in Savannah, a respected merchant with real business interests. His willingness to bid